couple months ago, a couple of IRS whistleblowers brought their story public of all of the ways in which the United States Department of Justice was interfering into an investigation into Hunter Biden and, by extension, his father, Joe. You can't ask about Joe. You can't ask about the big guy. You can't ask about Dad. Those were some of the warnings that of an assistant U.S. attorney, at least, in the out of Delaware, was giving to investigators as they were digging into the Biden family's taxes. Well, now Hunter Biden is suing the IRS. Overnight, we get the report Hunter Biden has sued the Internal Revenue Service, alleging that its agents, quote, targeted and sought to embarrass him when discussing his private tax information, violating his rights as a taxpayer. Interesting. Also, what would be embarrassing about any of this? Why would you be embarrassed to have your taxes exposed here? For more on this, let's bring in Tristan Leavitt. He's a president of Empower Oversight and an attorney representing IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley as well. Tristan, great to have you with us, sir.
Thanks so much for having me, Vince.
This is interesting. So why would Hunter Biden be embarrassed by the disclosure of this information?
Well, that's an excellent question. I saw recently that it said he was embarrassed also by the laptop repair shop owner releasing the laptop that's not his up in Delaware. But I definitely know that whatever he's embarrassed by or not, that the IRS whistleblowers, including the one that I help represent, Gary Shapley, didn't release anything out of a target for a specific taxpayer. They just observed inappropriate interference and preferential treatment, both by the Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office and then by the Department of Justice overall. And that's a problem for the administration of justice in this country. So they wanted to bring that to Congress to highlight both the problems with the double standard of justice,
yes,
as well as how it conflicted with statements that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, had made before Congress.
And the IRS whistleblowers, including your client, it seems they did everything the right way. They approached the correct committee. They brought all of the information in an orderly fashion. If these guys were doing something that was illegal or speaking out of school, the media would have already had these guys strung up. But that's not the case here, is it?
Absolutely not. And not only the media, but the IRS is extremely strict about taxpayer privacy. The IRS would have also brought the hammer down.
Yes.
And this lawsuit filed this morning specifically complains that the IRS has done nothing to stop these individuals from sharing that information. And that's because the IRS is bound by the whistleblower protection laws, which
right.
is the area that I'm kind of most expert in. And they allow someone to bring this information forward. Even though there are provisions for protecting the privacy of taxpayer information, Congress that wrote those protections also wrote itself an exception. And so that's why we went to the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. And once they release that information, it's public. And so like any American citizen, anyone can speak about that, including Gary Shapley.
That's for sure. Meanwhile, my understanding is that the IRS whistleblowers, actually, when they came forward, they kind of really changed the calculus over at the Justice Department. There was some panic over the emergence of the whistleblowers as it related to Hunter Biden's case, because we saw Hunter Biden go forward and try and basically skate through with a very sweetheart deal from the United States Department of Justice, but that all fell apart. What role do you think the IRS whistleblowers played in that?
Well, I think there's a twofold role. First of all, what you see is you look both at their disclosures as well as what's been released since then by the media, which the whistleblowers didn't have access to, is that this case was dead at the beginning of this year after the U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California, a guy named Martin Estrada, who had donated to Kamala Harris's campaign, was a definite, prominent Democrat, and then was appointed by Biden's deposition. Once he declined to bring charges in California, U.S. Attorney Weiss was out of avenues. He either had to get special counsel authority from the Attorney General, which had been denied in the past, or he had to let the case die. And so that's what was happening. It was falling by the wayside. And so it's only because the whistleblowers came forward that it seems the Justice Department thought, we need to tie this up some way. We need to close out this case. That's where you see then this string of emails that have been released where they were originally going to offer a complete, not just a sweetheart deal, but a complete pass, right, where they would have required the Hunter plead guilty to no charges. And even that then got scotched as the whistleblower allegations continued to gain attention. And people said, wait a minute,
right?
Why, and so before the sweetheart deal got released, there was an even better deal for Hunter. And U.S. Attorney Weiss had to come in and say, this isn't a good idea. You have to at least plead guilty to a couple of these charges. And of course, even that imploded.
Yeah, it's interesting watching these revelations come out. So Joseph Ziegler and Gary Shapley, they come out in public and they say all of this, and it's really jaw-dropping to hear it. But I don't know either, man. I couldn't vouch for their credibility per se. It looks like they have great records at the IRS. They've been investigating tax crimes for many years. They by their own admission, had good reputations among their colleagues. But what I've been struck by is that the media hasn't really found an angle on these guys. I'm sure that they've been looking for one, but hasn't found an angle on these guys to suggest they're anything but credible. I think that's been very interesting and really telling.
Yeah, I agree. I will say that it's frustrating because then the media goes with whatever meager, tiny thing they can. And so, the House Ways and Means and the House Judiciary Committees have been conducting interviews of witnesses in the last week and a half. And so you may have seen some headlines saying that FBI supervisor denies or refutes claims.
Yes.
And what it comes down to is that these supervisors said, I don't remember, U.S. Attorney Weiss using that sentence. And that's what the media's hung their hats on. Meanwhile, they proceeded to say in the same interviews, but yeah, we knew that D.C. declined charges. We knew that the Central District of California declined charges. And we were sure Weiss had a way to go somewhere after that. And then their knowledge completely breaks down because they all admit they don't know what comes next. And what comes next under DOJ tax policy, which FBI agents are not the experts in. And in fact, with the FBI special agent in charge specifically said, I start to tune out when they talk about the tax charges because that's really not my area of expertise. But what happens is if you can't get the U.S. attorney and the other district to partner with you, you either have to get DOJ tax to endorse, which DOJ tax was withholding an endorsement on, or you have to get special authority from the attorney general. So that to us was the real headline out of those interviews, right? That's the ball game that everyone else acknowledged that these other U.S. attorneys blocked the charges.
Yeah, Politico had a report 5 days ago, headline, FBI official, Hunter Biden prosecutor faced pushback. And even their lead sentence in the piece was, an FBI agent involved in the Hunter Biden probe said the prosecutor leading it, that's David Weiss, sought but was denied help from a key fellow U.S. attorney. That would be the U.S. attorney in California, who denied help to David Weiss here. So in other words, Weiss didn't have all this power that he was claiming to have, or if he did, he was certainly not exercising it.
Well, and this was already, right? This is a bit of a farce to begin with because as even Jake Tapper and other very legacy media sources have noted, right, if Weiss had all the authority to begin with, like Garland said, he wouldn't have needed to be appointed as special counsel.
Right.
So I think a lot of people who just took at face value the Justice Department's denials of the whistleblower allegations and Garland saying, oh, he has all the authority, were scratching their head when he got appointed as special counsel because it didn't fit in any way with the narrative that they had taken hook, line, and sinker from the Justice Department.
Right. So now that Hunter Biden is suing the IRS, what does this mean for your client, Gary Shapley? How is he going to be involved in this lawsuit, if at all?
Well, since it's against the IRS, it's not against him individually. My co-counsel, Mark Laddell, and I are referenced in the lawsuit as Attorney A, and I'm Attorney B. But, I believe the statute only gives Hunter's attorneys the authority to file with the IRS anyway. It doesn't give them a right of action against any specific employee. So it really doesn't directly bear on them. The real question for us is, will the Justice Department, as it relates to this lawsuit, settle, in which case they would be, basically Hunter's attorneys have handed them an assist to say, hey, here's a way that you can undercut these whistleblowers by saying, oh, you're right, this was disclosed and it shouldn't have been.
Right.
We've seen no evidence of that so far, but again, that's a consideration. The other thing that's really concerning is not just this general lawsuit from Hunter's attorneys. It's that DOJ has shown in the past its willingness to follow the prompting of the White House. And you see this with the D.C. U.S. attorney who had the charges presented to his office. His first assistant, that's the top career official in the office, told the Delaware U.S. Attorney's Office they were optimistic about the case and they were going to assign a prosecutor to help with it. Then, on March 31st of 2022, White House spokesperson Kate Bedingfield said at a press conference, the president still believes his son did nothing wrong. And right at that time is when the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Matt Graves, rejected the case and said, no, we're not partnering either. And so having seen that happens already, it's not behind-the-scenes coordination, but the White House says what it wants in these public forums, and parts of DOJ, move to match that. And so over the weekend, the Wall Street Journal reported that some White House aides have been grumbling that they think that the IRS whistleblowers should have been dealt with more harshly by DOJ. And so we're waiting to see if DOJ takes that prompting and does come after the whistleblowers, not in the way that a private citizen can file the suit like Hunter's attorneys have, but if prosecutors specifically will try and go after the whistleblowers.
For something like mishandling information that they should have kept secret involving Hunter Biden. I mean, there's clearly there's an effort here to create a credibility crisis for your client and these whistleblowers.
Yeah, that's right.
And
it would be the same. Basically, this lawsuit teed up, even though the IRS, it's unlikely to prevail on the IRS level, but this lawsuit teed up if DOJ wanted to bring something where they would need to look, which, again, we believe they would realize that because Congress authorized the release of this, none of it would match up.
Tristan Leavitt, can you remind me of that date? Did you say it was March 21st that the White House spokeswoman said something to the effect of Joe believes his son did nothing wrong?
March 31st of 2022.
31st.
And then if you go to the interview transcript from Gary Shapley that was released by the Ways and Means Committee, he notes in there that the U.S. attorney right at the very end of March, that's when he declined charges, reversing his career first assistant.
And that came after the White House statement. That would have been the same day then if it's the 31st.
That's right. And either the 31st or April 1st, he wasn't consulting notes as we sat there in that interview. But again, right there at the end of March was when it was presented. And so, yeah, this clearly had an impact.
Amazing. It's just amazing. I'm so glad. I mean, obviously you have to by virtue of your job, but I'm so glad somebody's paying attention to the details. That seems like a really big deal. And then one last thing for you. Over the weekend, you mentioned this Wall Street Journal report, and the framing of the Wall Street Journal report is that the White House was grumpy that they don't have enough control over Merrick Garland anymore. That he's just striking out independently, and he's upholding the law without political interference. What do you make of that frame?
I don't know. I mean, it's so at every level here, right? I mean, my background as a congressional investigator is to be very cynical, which has only been furthered by my career working as a whistleblower lawyer. So I don't know in terms of Merrick Garland. I know that there are many, why he decided this was the time, or maybe the bigger question is with Weiss. Why it is that Weiss finally requested this information or this appointment as special counsel now is a big mystery, because Weiss, as of the end of last year, himself was very grumpy with Special Agent Shapley for making these disclosures about him. And as Weiss learned that Shapley throughout the case had been highlighting the ways that prosecutors pulled punches or made decisions that he believed were unethical, that's why Weiss directed that he be taken off the case. So it's hard to know. Again, I'm sure the White House is grumpy about a lot of things right now, right? And whether Merrick Garland, to what extent he holds up or under pressure or he maintains any semblance of independence, I don't have insight to. And same with Weiss, who, again, has kind of gone back and forth. How do you go from being in a position where you're not going to bring a case at all, and then you're going to let them go with no charges at all, and then you back away and still have this hidden immunity agreement in the sweetheart plea deal that Judge Noriega torpedoes, and then go from that to bringing the gun charges right now? I mean, it's just a total roller coaster, right? So what's in David Weiss's mind, nobody knows. If
the IRS whistleblowers, to include, again, your client, Gary Shapley, hadn't come forward, do you think that David Weiss would be a special counsel today?
Without question, no. I think this case would just be dead. People would be saying, are we ever going to hear about that at some time? And he would just sit on it until the statute of limitations had expired for all of the charges.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. All right. Well, thank you very much, Tristan Leavitt. Really appreciate your time today. Look forward to chatting with you again soon, sir. Thank you.